Hey everybody, welcome to the KMK Podcast, your spot for real talk on money moves, smart planning, and building the future you deserve. Stick around, we've got a great show lined up. And now, here's your host, Nathan Key.
I'm Nathan Key with KMK Financial. We're excited to announce and start our very first quarterly educational series. What I'm hoping to do during this series is provide material and content that we think is relevant and important to our clients and to our overall audience. And I'm honored, can I use that word?
Yeah, you
Honored today to be able to spend with a friend of mine, Aaron Burgess. Should I call you Dr. Burgess?
No, you can just call me Aaron since we're friends,
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
I'll let you give a little bit about your background, but you have a strong background in theology,
Yeah.
ethics,
Mm-hmm.
business, philosophy, economy.
Yes.
Is that safe to say you're a pretty smart dude?
I mean, some people think I am. Some of my family members do not, but you know, they know me personally. So yeah.
You're one of the sharpest guys I've met.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. But
You were a college professor of mine. You've taught at several universities
yeah.
here to do that. You want to share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I just currently am a MBA professor at Mount Vernon Nazarene University, and I mainly focus in strategic management, global business, and leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach graduate students and doctoral students in the business and leadership fields.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing that for about 20 to 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my prize students happens to be the one that I'm looking at right now. So,
I'll do that.
it's a very successful. Yeah.
Well, thank you. You had probably the most interesting class I think I had you for
Ethics.
ethics.
Yes.
It was very, very interesting to do that.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping today is, and we probably won't get through all of it, but kind of agenda is inflation,
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about the US dollar, talk a little bit about the national debt, and then maybe end with American exceptionalism if we're able to do that.
Yeah.
You had sent me, and I'll kind of set it up and then let you have to play with it. Milton Friedman, who argued that inflation, quote, always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. The reason I'm going to start with inflation, I don't want to get into tariffs. I feel like people are just bombarded with that. No one really knew what that word meant.
Yeah.
Before Trump, and then now it's on everyone's mind. So I will kind of stay away from the tariff side, but people do understand inflation because it has a direct impact to them. So we won't start with this, but include this in your topic or your discussion is how it directly impacts people with food, shelter, and energy.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll start with inflation, what causes it. Some label it as a hidden tax, and then who it impacts the most.
Yeah, I think most people recognize inflation when they go to the grocery store, especially on the price of just common items and common goods that they buy every day, but they don't really know what causes it. And of course, there's a lot of debate in our society. You'll go on YouTube and people will be talking about the causes of inflation. But Milton Friedman was one of the leading economists from the University of Chicago in the past, and he did a longitudinal study on the cause of inflation. And as you read, it's simply just a monetary phenomenon.
Meaning simplify that for us.
Essentially, that when the supply of money grows too fast, that's when you get inflation.
Such as
you have too much money chasing too few of goods, right? So when production, which is gross domestic product, which is the measure of how much all of us as Americans produce, right? It's our national income, right? Income is just how we measure or keep score of how productive we are as individuals and then in the aggregate as a group. And you can slice and dice that any way. You can have a state GDP, like for instance, California's GDP is one of the top 5 economies in the world. It's larger than the GDP of Canada. You can slice that by cities. And some of American cities have higher
New York.
incomes than some nations.
Yeah.
Not only by size, but by overall GDP per capita, which is broken down to the income per person in an economy. So when money supply outpaces the productivity of that economy, right? That means that there's just too much money and we're not producing enough things. There's too much money chasing goods and services. Then naturally, the price of things is going to go up, right? Because the dollar or whatever unit of currency that country uses, then it's just going to require more of those units of currency, the dollar, to buy the same good. So it's not, when you go to the grocery store, it's not that eggs are actually costing you more. It's not the egg that you should focus on. It's
how much the $1
is the value of the dollar has decreased because of the increase in the money supply.
Sure.
And money supply only increases in two ways in an economy. And for the context, let's talk about the United States. It increases first by the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates low for too long. And
it's all in.
Well, we have seen since really a consistently low interest rate policy or philosophy by the Federal Reserve, regardless of who is the chair of the Federal Reserve since 2008. And
You saw a steady decline in interest rates.
Well, interest rates were kept near almost zero for a while, where people were able to borrow money for 2% for a mortgage, right? And car loans were low, even credit card rates were low. And so when the Federal Reserve keeps interest rates low, then borrowing happens faster because people can afford to borrow, right? Because borrowing is just basically the price of money.
So what you mean by that is their ability to borrow and the payment be affordable compared to their income.
It encourages debt.
Correct.
Which can be good because then that allows businesses, right, to grow.
So it has a stimulating factor, basically.
To borrow money cheaply for capital and
expand.
And also to earn profit on their investment. And also banks to do really well, because if I got free money or close to free money, it wouldn't be that challenging then to make more money on free money.
Sure.
And that's essentially what happens. And every time the bank lends someone money, if there's a lot of lending that the bank does, that just multiplies the amount of money in the economy. Yes.
Sure. So then if we take that, so you had low rates for an extended period of time. I met somebody yesterday that had a 30-year mortgage for like 2.65.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's great. So what happens when that policy maybe overextended itself?
Yes, because you're multiplying money in the economy to where the money supply just continues to grow, right? Unchecked. And so the value of the dollar over time will go down. Here's the thing with multiplying money is that at first you may not experience it, right? And it's nice. I mean, during COVID, it was really nice, right? When we had super low interest rates.
Absolutely.
And the government was sending stimulus checks. And that's the other way that the money supply increases, is that the government has to borrow money, right, to create new money in order to meet its budgetary demands. And we can talk about where the government borrows money from and how that works. But so during COVID, you had both of those
interest rate accommodations, right?
Yes, both of those effects.
And the government was spending the money, basically.
Was printing money,
correct?
Right, basically borrowing money, and so that's what ended up happening.
Which had a stimulative effect,
but it did.
But that was not.
But inflation does not generally happen at first.
Did not.
Right. So it's like an alcoholic, right? The first few drinks, right? And for a time, alcohol or drug addiction, it doesn't necessarily maybe even impact you that much. But over time, you develop an addiction to cheap money, but then you've got to pay the price. You've got to curb your spending. You've got to curb your debt eventually. You can't continue to borrow money infinitely or forever. You can't have a ton of cheap money in the economy. And that's what ended up happening, is that by the time that the Biden administration came into power, we began to feel the effects of all the money that was basically grown in the economy over time from government spending and from low interest rates. I mean, we had those two that were compounding that problem. And then eventually the price of eggs, the price of oil, everything. And, the government would come out, because politicians never like to tell you that the cause of inflation is their policies, right? So then they're going to blame the price of eggs on
Kroger,
on corporations, or the bird flu, right? Or the price of oil on Vladimir Putin, right? His war. And so those may be short-term causes of price increases, but that's not really, in my estimation, the type of chronic inflation that we are experiencing. And even though inflation has gone down, that's just the 2.5% maybe.
It isn't that off of an already elevated.
Yes.
So when they say inflation only increased 1-2%, that's off of a level that is already very high compared to 2017.
Yes.
So would it be safe to say that inflation is in essence a hidden tax?
So yes, it's a hidden.
And does it ever really go away?
No.
Inflation. For those that are thinking that they want to wait till home prices to decrease, eggs to go back down to $1.99, milk to go down, your vehicle prices to go down.
Well, I mean, so the Federal Reserve's goal is to basically control inflation, and they don't want a deflationary market like we have in 2008. That's a worse situation. So you always want a little bit of inflation, because inflation shows that the economy is growing, right? And that's what Milton Friedman said, is that the amount of money in an economy, the money supply, should grow at the same rate as
GDP, right?
As productivity, as business growth, right? So in that way, that we can pay then for the money supply growth, right? That we can pay for it with our productivity.
Meaning the cost to service that money, that debt, right?
Well, no. Ideally, you would never have debt. That's what Milton Friedman would say. Right? Is
That's
that
not where we're at? Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you look at your personal household income, ideally, you wouldn't have any debt, that your income could cover all of the expenses that you have.
So the household makes 50, household makes 70, household makes $100,000, that their ability to sustain that lifestyle and debt is commensurate with what they make. So that would be similar to the Dave Ramsey approach of don't spend more than you make. And then the devastating effect, if you do that, the compounding, which can be wonderful in one area, can be devastating in another, correct?
Yes, correct. At some point, debt has to subside. Now, we don't know with the United States what that number is. What are the yearly deficits that we can sustain? And then ultimately, what are the number of, liabilities that the United States government can absorb? Right.
Let me interrupt. Let's talk about that just for a second, because this will bleed into exactly what you're saying. So the national debt is, say, 37 trillion. This is T, which is even hard to comprehend. Broken down per taxpayer, about 323,000. So in essence, for every single taxpayer in the United States, their share of this total debt
Yeah.
is $325,000. And the interest payments, rough estimate for 2025 is approaching $900 billion. I mean, that's how much the federal government, i.e. the taxpayer, is spending to just service that debt. They're projecting by next year it'll be $1 trillion payment, which is approaching 15% of all federal expenditures to service the national debt.
Yeah. So in a sense, you pay for all of that debt with taxes.
What if the taxes are not enough to cover the debt?
If the taxes are not enough to cover the debt within the budget, right? Within that annual budget, within the year, then generally that will create inflation. And so the tax is felt at the grocery store, at the gas pump, right? With insurance payments, which are going up, all of that. That's
was a direct hit on the end user.
On the consumer, yes.
And especially someone that is, let's say, retired, that is on a fixed income, right?
Yeah.
Getting X amount of dollars, whether it's through Social Security, pension, whatever it may be. So their ability to absorb those higher costs is very difficult. Or a family that has a salary and a fixed income, their ability to absorb those higher costs, right? Whether it's daycare, childcare increases, your insurance rates go up. There's only so much money you make, and then, like you said, which you said great, is that dollar is just worth less and less and less. So what you could buy this year for $1, you won't be able to buy next year for $1.
Yeah. So
that's very tough to get ahead, I guess, is my point.
Because you have to work more, right? Your productivity has to increase to make the same amount of dollars.
Correct. To absorb that cost.
Yeah. And so inflation always impacts the poor or the lower middle class more because their incomes are lower, right? The cost of goods go up, and they also do not own assets that increase at the same rate of inflation, right? So they generally don't own homes and stocks, which generally inflate with an inflationary economy.
So it's a direct hit on their ability to sustain a lifestyle.
Yes,
because they have a greater share of their income goes towards food, shelter, and energy costs.
Yeah, and they're not invested in the stock market.
Correct. Or in real estate or assets that in time typically appreciate or inflate.
We call it appreciation in accounting.
Sure.
In economics, and we call it inflation. Inflation. And so when we talk about the growing divide between rich and poor, right? Often politicians talk about it in regards to tax policy, and taxes are related to that, but they generally do not talk about the hidden tax of inflation, right? And also, another thing that gets inflated is income, right? Because there becomes a pressure on employees to demand of their employers to pay them a little bit more to keep up with the rise in prices. And so there is a demand in the market.
A universal minimum wage, right? That they advocate for.
I mean, just in general, the job market. So income inflates, but it doesn't inflate at the same rate as
the cost,
as the general inflation. Right. And so people are always feeling behind. Right. And
it's very hard to get ahead.
So what happens to you, though, what happens to you as far as taxes go if your income increases? You pay more taxes. You move into higher tax brackets. So inflation is a good way that politicians
can say, oh, we're going to cut taxes over here in this big, beautiful bill on paper. But if your incomes are being inflated, you automatically move into an upper tax bracket.
Which means your tax.
Yes. And
liability.
you have essentially inflation creates taxation without representation. Because your congressman or congresswoman didn't vote for a tax increase. They actually voted for a tax break, but you got a tax increase because income inflation moved you into a higher tax bracket. And nobody voted for it. It's a really good, to inflate the currency is a good way for sneaky politicians to raise taxes without actually passing a bill.
Let's talk about this transition a little bit.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Let's talk about, has been conversation of the United States and that the U.S. dollar losing its status being a reserve currency. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's been the reserve currencies for the past 60 years.
Yeah.
End of World War II, I believe. And then this idea of the petrodollar, right? That oil is traded globally in U.S. dollars, 1974. And then BlackRock, I'll read you this, I'll turn it back over to you, said, and I'll post a link in the video that, quote, speculation about the dollar losing its reserve currency status remains far-fetched. No viable alternative currency meets the scale and systemic requirements to underpin global trade. The dollar taking a marginally less prominent share of foreign reserves relative to the rising share of gold is possible. However, full-scale de-dollarization is still a long ways away, but there's one dynamic playing out that could raise the risk: debt.
Yeah, because if you have a lot of debt, right? Even let's look at it at the individual level.
Household.
If you have a lot of debt compared to your income, right? Banks may still lend you money, but they're going to raise the cost of lending you money because you're riskier, right? And so where there's risk, right? Banks
Demand a
better reward.
Better return in essence.
Yeah. So like, for instance, when the nation of Greece defaulted, their national securities, like I think a Greek treasury bond was paying 19% at one time. And that's because people were taking a lot of risk to loan Greece money. And that's what ends up happening to the United States eventually, is that if its debt goes up, it looks like a riskier investment over time.
And that means what?
The cost of borrowing will go up.
Sure.
Right? And the Federal Reserve at that point could tinker with the interest rates to try to lower them, but that may not change
the trajectory
the bond market or other treasury markets.
Or some of it is just perception.
Yeah.
Correct? The perception, which kind of goes back to my endpoint of American exceptionalism, is some of it is perception.
There's always a subjective element to economics.
Sure.
And there's always a subjective element to getting a loan with the bank, right? So it's not always about necessarily the numbers. There's a psychology to economics.
Yes. And the United States has been able to trump that because there is the perception, reality or not reality is irrelevant at this point, that it is the safest place. It is the best place.
So when Congress has problems passing a budget, right? Or like a bill like the big, beautiful bill, or they have problems with the debt limit, or they can't seem to come to an agreement to reduce government spending, because that's going to add confidence to the debt market, the U.S. debt market.
Taking it serious, basically, right?
Then that does add, in the short term and maybe even the long term, some concerns about the U.S. being a
slightly higher risk.
Yes, a good customer.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But right now, it doesn't seem like that is.
No.
Because you've always said this. Where else are people going to put their money?
Well, China, what currency does China trade in?
U.S. dollars.
Yeah. all the things that they ship out, right? And then they import in, it's all in dollars. And the reason is because Chinese currency is not very well accepted on the global scale. Yeah. Internally, it's used, but China has a lot of debt. If you think our debt's bad, you should look at China's debt. China's debt's so bad, and we don't even know how much debt they have. So a lot of countries still trade in the dollar because of its value and that it's linked to one thing, and that is the United States GDP, right? Our inability to produce things of value through our productivity, our income. And that's how that's measured. And I think that there's an understanding or there's an assumption that the United States will always produce that income, right? And that ultimately the value of the dollar is tied to the US government's ability to tax its citizens, to tax that income, right? And pay back that debt. Because the value of your dollar is no longer related to a commodity like gold, to a real physical thing. When we say a fiat currency, it's really pegged to the GDP, the income of the United States, because that income,
productivity.
Yes, correct. How much the U.S. government's ability to tax
the productivity.
Yes, the income
of a highly productive group of people.
Right, the most productive
in the world.
In the world,
which is here.
Yes, so they can tax that income and raise taxes if they have to service that debt, which is the big debate in Congress. And there's arguments, the Laffer curve says that the best way to increase tax revenue is to decrease taxes.
Which Reagan adopted.
That's generally been the Republicans' platform, and some of Milton Friedman would argue that too. But Friedman would argue that government spending needs to decrease. And the Federal Reserve needs to keep interest rates high in an inflationary environment. And that is the policy that Powell is following right now.
But if you look, though, we've had a little bit of both. You've had this idea of reducing taxes dramatically, but then keeping government spending very elevated. So it's almost the worst of both worlds. You have the conservative viewpoint, which is reduce taxation, but then the spending hasn't followed. And you have the other side that says we want to continue to spend. So
But remember,
has to give, I guess, is what.
But remember, it all eventually will balance out, because remember, you are paying taxes on that deficit currently and in the future. You're currently paying for that deficit through inflation, right?
Absolutely.
Because inflation is related to prices, and prices have a relationship between income. And that which you don't pay for through inflation right now or taxes, you will pay in the future.
It doesn't sound like it's going away.
No. It's just like if you were to go borrow, let's say $400,000 for your mortgage, that is income that you owe to that bank. That's a liability on your income, both present and future.
For 30 years, right?
And that is exactly what the government debt and the current deficit, that's how it's going to get paid, is by you and I and everybody else working, producing, making an income. So that $300,000 that you owe as an individual citizen, we may not think of it like that, but that is a tax on your future income. If you really look at inflation, you take that $300,000 that you owe, right? That's essentially how much of your total income that you will earn in your lifetime. That's how much less your total income is worth. Does that make sense? Because you owe that. So if you make $1 million over your lifetime, out of that $1 million, it's worth $300,000 less. either because of the taxes that you have to pay
The higher
or
costs,
because of the higher costs.
which is inflation.
That's really where you can begin to see, you know,
The erosion of
Yeah.
people's purchasing power.
yeah.
Let's
I mean, if you make $10 million a year, it's not that big a number.
how many people do that?
Yeah. But if you make $20,000 a year,
Or 100 as a household if you're in California,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
you're in New York or
Yeah.
Chicago. It's all relative to,
Yeah.
to where you're at.
so that's reinforce that $300,000 that all of those that we owe individually, that's how much you can subtract from your lifetime income
Future
right now,
earnings.
from your future and present earnings.
Mm-hmm.
So if a child's born today, they're already in the whole $300,000.
And it just continues to compound.
Yes, that's how much more that child has to earn over a lifetime to maintain the living standards of today, $300,000 plus.
Which is a lot.
Put that in perspective.
Lower the press, and let's end on a positive note.
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
because you and I like to
Yeah.
we consider ourselves realists, but our girlfriends would probably say that we're pessimistic, maybe.
I don't. Yeah. I am. I'm. Most people see my realism as pessimism. Definitely, yes.
Same. I just
Yeah.
tell people
Yeah.
I'm a realist.
Yeah.
Let's end with on a positive note,
Yeah.
American exceptionalism, which is defined as the belief that the United States is either distinctive, unique, or exemplary compared to other nations. And then Jamie Dimon said, I believe it was on Bloomberg TV when he was in Paris, quote, "We shouldn't assume it's forever," meaning the American exceptionalism. But if you were to take all your money and put it in one country, it would still be America.
Yeah, I think as far as economically, and I think when we talk about American exceptionalism, we should probably just view it through the economic lens.
Correct.
Because you get into political debates, and it's a very subjective, observation about which is the best country, and that's not really what American exceptionalism is saying. Is that we're better than everyone else, but what it is saying is that America has a unique set of characteristics, values, and also just assets that other countries do not have.
Correct.
And a lot of that is related to natural resources, two oceans, right? On either side, technology,
Really smart people. Very talented.
our higher education system, though it gets criticized, is the best in the world. I teach students from all over the world who come to Columbus, Ohio to get an education. They fly 15 hours and move to the United States to learn here from one of our smaller liberal arts colleges compared to the education that they would get at.
When I was at
Yeah.
UCLA
There.
for graduation,
Yeah.
it had a significant
Yeah.
percentage of students that came from all over the world.
Yeah. So America has its problems. It has always had problems, and that's
Always
not
will,
what we're
some
saying.
Right.
Yeah, no, America has a lot of problems. Inflation is one of its worst problems. And, it's in that inflation's relationship to our national debt.
Sure.
The national debt has been concerning ever since I can remember. In the 80s under Reagan, I remember concerns about the national debt.
Right.
And that's chump change in the 80s compared to what we have now, right? So I think that we will have to make some difficult changes to our political system over time. And but America has always had the ability, for some reason, to reform itself.
They really do.
It's not as fast as we want it to be, but somehow we tend to manage and move on. I don't necessarily believe so much in the American government or our politicians, but when I meet Americans, when I meet individual citizens of this country, and I meet immigrants who come here for the opportunities that America affords them, That's where I get my hope and my optimism about America, is because of its individuals, not its government, but because of the people here. There is a spirit here in America amongst people that is unlike anywhere else that I've been.
And you've traveled a lot.
Yeah.
I've traveled a lot
Yeah.
to do that.
So
Let's end it there. 'Cause
that's it. That's kind of positive, right?
That kind of really
Summed it up. Yeah.
It was an honor to see you and speak to you
Yes.
again. And we really appreciate everybody taking the time. We're going to continue to do this. We look forward to feedback, and we'll have additional topics, and maybe even invite this ravish young man on again.